used to calculate density, plus all of the constrained land you can't build on anyway, is set aside as open space. So that is one change I'd make to your formula. You say 50% of the gross area. What if you have 50 acres and 40 of it is floodplain? You want to buffer that really constrained land and woodlands with a little bit of good land so that people can enjoy it too. And so there's room to accommodate the development. And when these numbers work together, density is based on net area and open space is net area plus the constrained land. The numbers work and the developer builds a home on an appropriately sized lot. And I'd offered to Sam, there's an exercise you can go through to see what happens when the site's very constrained and not at all constrained. And I know you don't have time for that tonight, but I'd be glad to run through it. You require that the open space is connected. This is actually 2 subdivisions and the trails connect the 2 developments. So this community has started to build a greenway in London Grove Township, Southern Chester County. Like you, they're requiring a management plan for the open space. The farmer in the property on the right kept the trees. I don't know if you can see this arrow on the screen or not. But the farmer on this sort of circular development in the lower left had cleared the land right to the edge of the stream. So this open space management plan plants some more trees to fill in the gaps. Trees don't go quickly, but this is 15 years later, and you can see there's a pretty healthy riparian buffer. It's also really easy to follow those riparian buffer rules that you're putting in your natural features and landscaping section, because the development's more compact and the open space guidelines call for trees and woodlands and streams to be set aside as open space. This township took advantage of their cluster ordinance, which at one late meeting when the developer wanted an approval, they said, well, you've got about a 3-page engineer's letter. Do you want to come back until every item is taken care of? Or what about that 85 acres on the corner? Do you really need it? Because we need a park. So in this case, the developer donated the corner as parkland. The township bought the small rectangle below, only 7 acres. They found they had an adjoining landowner who was very generous, Mr. Goddard. He donated some parkland, and they bought an easement and put trails on 2 other properties. So they built a public greenway at very low cost through a combination of codes and an open space acquisition program. Not far from you in Villanova in Lower Marion Township, they had one of the last big estates left, used these same approaches to cluster. And it's pretty important because in this township, a developer, and most of the examples I have, a developer has 2 choices. They can build at that underlying density, maybe it's 1 acre in the R1 district, but they have to set aside the open space. And if they don't want to set aside the open space, well, they get half as many lots. It's their choice. I nearly always see a developer choose the maximum density option, but sometimes a landowner who's going to stay on a property will choose fewer lots, fewer bigger lots. Hareton Farm is in Villanova at the intersection of Old Gulf Road and Spring Mill Road. It was very important to the community that this meadow on the lower left corner, as well as the woodlands, were preserved. So they did that, and they managed to retain the historic buildings as well, and this very narrow stream corridor. Almost no constrained land here. They also had MS4 obligations to meet in this township. So that corner meadow I showed you is also a stormwater basin. It doesn't look like a big stormwater basin because the infiltration beds are buried underneath, and there are some very shallow berms through the woods that also infiltrate stormwater. So you could put those standards in your code. We're finding some communities feel they need to allow for additional multifamily housing. I love that your cluster has no minimum lot size. I think that provides a lot of flexibility. Many communities replace their older PRD with sort of this village option. So this is West Vincent Township, the Chester Springs area. And they had a big 300-acre tract at 401 and Route 100. North and east of here, they still have dirt roads. It's a very rural community, and they wanted to do everything they could to retain that rural character. But they decided at this intersection, they could tolerate a little bit of non-residential use. It was zoned light industrial, and they could allow multifamily housing. They required that site analysis and the 4-step design process. And in the 4-step design process, they said, let's preserve these wooded headwaters areas, and let's preserve as much of this farm in the northeast corner as possible. So after walking the site, the developer's plan fit hand in glove with 285 homes, more than one, almost one home per acre when you net out the undevelopable land, but on only 35% of the property. And they worked hard to preserve this edge between the more developed road intersection and the countryside beyond. This sort of blends the best of what we call traditional neighborhood development, homes close to the street, tiny lots. These are only 8,000, less than a quarter-acre lots, and street trees, again, between the sidewalk and the curb. There's a requirement for a little bit of internal open space, so the homes aren't right on top of each other. In the background, you see the woods, part of that larger woodland conservation area, but you also see a small central green just to break up the development itself. At the commercial corner, there's a branch of the Chester County Library. The commercial market was pretty slow, and they are just now filling in that corner with other commercial uses. Even a small site, and you have mostly small sites left. This is in Buckingham Township, Bucks County, only 6 lots, preserved a historic house with a tree farm, and built 5 new homes. As you drive into the subdivision, you see a beautiful meadow, and that meadow is also the stormwater management area for the subdivision. So again, you can take the 18 lots and build them across the entire property, or you can do more to encourage your cluster approach. These 2 plans, the conventional versus the conservation or cluster, have the same number of homes. And the cluster plan on the right actually has 900 linear feet less roadway, even though some of the homes are only on one side of the street. It's very important in most communities to get rid of the conditional use process for cluster, because it adds a lot of cost and time. And if a developer gets the same number of homes under either scenario, he's likely to go the conventional path. So we usually get rid of the conditional use and cut the number of lots by half if the developer doesn't want the open space option. So on average, tracking these since the early 1990s, for about 50 townships that have very rigorous versions of these cluster codes, on average, they're setting aside about 62% gross of properties each time it's developed. There are other standards. You have a really thoughtful town center ordinance. I'll talk about that in a minute. But as lots get smaller, you want to be careful that garages don't dominate your street frontage. I call this the snout house version. It's all garage. This is maybe the worst example I've seen in York County, Pennsylvania. They haven't even cut the driveways in. You know, this is the front of the street. And I don't think any of us want our new neighborhoods to look like this. So if you have a maximum setback for the garage or require that it can be turned to the side if it's in the front yard, this is nearby in Radnor Township. And this is in the borough of Malvern, where that garage has to be recessed behind the main facade. Your neighborhoods start to take on a greener look. You've looked closely at that Westchester Pike and 252 intersection, and since my office is right down the road, I especially appreciate that. And we're starting to see these older shopping centers change pretty quickly. I really liked that on your land use plan, rather than having sort of wall-to-wall commercial like the image on the left, you've concentrated the commercial development in nodes and then have more intense residential around it, and you're trying to preserve some of the countryside beyond. So there's your proposed zoning map on the right and sort of a schematic of a nice way to accommodate that growth. I think it's really important that you enforce the design standards that Sam has written. I have to admit, they're not easy to enforce. I hope you'll keep Sam on to help you with that, because I think the first few applications require some professional help. On the left, the parking can be in the front of the building. On the right, it's to the side or the rear. This is an example in the ground at 401 and 100 near the development I showed you earlier called Weatherstone. You know, Chester Springs is maybe a little bit more rural than Newtown Square. So these are 1.5-story buildings. Your ordinance calls for 2-story heights. But you can see it's very similar to this diagram with the commercial building pulled up closer to the street and the parking to the side or to the rear. You might eventually at 252 and 3 see that corner evolve, as in this drawing by Dover Cole, a firm in Florida that works a lot with sort of new urbanist or redeveloping mixed use areas, where you start to see street trees and then buildings brought up to that maximum setback. Sam and I talked quite a bit about what those setbacks should be, and I agree with him on interior roads. You know, at the building can be just nearly on the right-of-way line, but along Westchester Pike, I think we need to be more thoughtful and probably have a little bit larger setback. That's a noisy road, and where you might have a building that also has housing in it, you probably don't want it right on the road. I'm not sure what that magic number is. I think I'd want to spend a little more time measuring what's already there, and maybe you all know what that number is anyway. It takes a long time for these commercial centers to fill in, but over time they do, and you start to get a sense of place in your town center. Because I work for a conservation organization and so many communities I work with are struggling to meet MS4 requirements for retaining water quality, I really encourage you to require that your commercial developments include landscaping, so that instead of this, you start to see this. And when people tell me, well, how do we plow snow? I want to remind you that the picture you're seeing now is from the Minneapolis area, where the winters are even worse than here. You really can choose plant materials that tolerate the pileup of snow and are a little bit salt resistant. This is a commercial example from the Lehigh Valley, where they've put in an infiltration area that filters out pollutants, and then the plants absorb the rainwater. You're seeing year 1 and year 2 of the development. I remind you that You're in control of the standards you set for new development. So a Home Depot in your community can look like this, or the Home Depot can look like this. And a drive-through bank can have a rain garden that transforms an otherwise chemical lawn corner, or you can plant native plants and let that be a big part of the stormwater solution. And with the type of town center standards you're considering, a Staples in your community can look like this, or it can look like this. So I really had four, again, to summarize, four recommendations: that in the street tree section, you consider removing some of the invasive species, requiring that, with the exception of times when there are overhead utility lines, street trees are deciduous shade trees, and that those standards might be better suited in your subdivision ordinance so that the zoning hearing board isn't overburdened with variances when someone wants a different tree species than your list includes. For the cluster, get rid of the conditional use, make it by right, and reduce the number of homes that can be achieved if you choose conventional development. I didn't spend a lot of time, but use the 4-step process to determine the open space rather than just a deep buffer and berm. You can still require a small setback, but don't let all of your open space be sort of a ring around the collar edge to your subdivision. And I think you're doing great in the town center district. I think those design guidelines can be challenging to enforce. And again, I encourage you to continue to work with Sam so that those first developments that come in meet your goals for how that corner redevelops. And I know you have a long agenda, so I'd be happy to take questions or and to have Sam jump in, who knows the draft better than I do.
Thank you, Ann. Does anyone have questions that they would like to ask of Ann? I don't see anything. So Ann, thank you.
Okay.
I am going to go right now to Sam. Sam Haber is with the Delaware County Planning Department. The board brought the Delaware County Planning Department on, gosh, I guess it's about 1.5 years ago now. And we've started the process. And so without me spending any time, I'm going to let Sam go ahead and get started and take us through where we are. But basically, we created a zoning task force or zoning rewrite task force that's been working with Sam to get to this point. And I'll let Sam go.
Okay, hello everyone. Steve mentioned my name is Sam Haber. I'm with the Delaware County Planning Department. And we've been working with the township to do a comprehensive rewrite of their zoning ordinance. So in my review of what we've developed, I'm gonna take a little step back from the open space and cluster development zoning aspects that Ann talked about and focus on some other areas, in addition to talking about some of those things that Ann discussed and how we integrated some of her recommendations into the draft of the zoning ordinance. So again, the overall purpose of the project is the revision of the township's code, its zoning ordinance. It's designed to implement the principal themes, goals, and objectives of the Township Comprehensive Plan of 2016. And another purpose of this process was to reorganize and streamline the zoning ordinance to improve the readability and ease of use for the township residents, developers, and other users. Just a quick recap, everyone knows where Newtown is located. It's highlighted here in yellow. It's strategically located at the intersections of routes 3 and 252 in western Delaware County. The township has experienced significant new development in the form of a town center and mixed residential development over the past decade or so. There are a handful of remaining mid to large size undeveloped tracts. And those show up on those are identified on the map that Anne provided, the open space tracts, if you will, or the open space preservation priority tracts. And overall portions of the township retain a suburban rural character, which the township would like to preserve while continuing to enhance social and economic vitality. The four principal themes of the comprehensive plan and how they relate to zoning. The first main theme was address development form. And basically the comprehensive plan, one of the basic themes is that new development should be consistent with existing neighborhood form and character. And that also a town center should develop at routes 3 and 252 that is cohesive, walkable, and aesthetically pleasing. Can everyone see my cursor moving on the screen? Yeah, okay, all right. So the second theme was the need for trails and sidewalks to enable walking for both recreation and for access to destinations within and outside of the township. Preservation of the township's remaining open spaces and natural resources to the degree that zoning can assist with that. We are trying to do that. And then reduction of traffic congestion at the intersections of 3 and Route 252 and its spillover effects on surrounding roads. Zoning is somewhat limited in how it can address this particular theme of the comprehensive plan, but those are the four key themes from the comprehensive plan that inform the zoning ordinance update. I've been working with the zoning task force committee that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors. It's comprised of township staff, some members of the Board of Supervisors, members of the Planning Commission, and a mix of residents. And the task force has been tasked with a comprehensive review and revision of the township's existing ordinance. And we've been working on that for 1.5 years now, 2 years, coming up on 2 years. There has been a public process. A township code should reflect best practices and represent the vision and desires of the community. And this is necessary to help protect the resources of the township and plan effectively for future development. A workshop was held that 50 residents attended and contributed their ideas on how they would like to see the township develop and how they envision zoning occurring moving forward. We had some mapping exercises where the residents were able to illustrate some of their ideas and concepts. And then we also had an online questionnaire where we got feedback from residents on how they would like to see the zoning proceed in the future. So the responses that we got from the public meeting and the questionnaire were incorporated to inform the zoning ordinance update. Similar to Anne, near the beginning of the process, the county planning department prepared a zoning assessment. It was based on an analysis of the existing zoning with input from the zoning task force and the public at those meetings, as I mentioned. The current ordinance was adopted in 1974 and amended in 2009, with subsequent individual amendments since then. The township, as I mentioned, adopted a new comprehensive plan in 2016 with specific recommendations for zoning changes. And the zoning assessment, which was presented to the board back in May of 2019, reviewed the strengths and weaknesses of the current ordinance and identified and made recommendations for revisions and rewrites. And those recommendations came out as principally focused on updating zoning districts and land use controls. And this involves basically streamlining and reducing the number of zoning districts through the merger and consolidation of redundant zoning districts, which the township currently has a few. Provide for a variety of uses in the multiple use area as designated in the comprehensive plan. So the multiple use area is all the area in orange that is shown on the map. And the area that's outlined in black is where we're proposing a new town center zoning district, which will expand the types of uses allowed in at least a significant part of the multiple use area. The comprehensive plan and our recommendations also called for limiting the scale and intensity of use in the revitalization area, which is, again, the area in black outline, which is basically becoming the new town center zoning district. We also recommended consideration of a natural resource conservation overlay, which is something Ann talked about in terms of expanding the riparian buffer requirements and writing more into the zoning to preserve other natural features such as wetlands and woodland disturbance. We also identified the need to specify and enhance evaluative criteria uses and special exceptions, and also to review and assess regulations for parking and signs. In terms of the ordinance reorganization, as I mentioned, we wanted to improve the readability and ease of use for the township and other users. There was an excess of, or there still is an excess of individual articles with redundancies or contradictory provisions. So we combined individual zoning district. We also are combining individual zoning district articles into a single multi-purpose article with a tabular format. So it'll be easier to read and reference what the township zoning districts are. And we're recommending that the township consider repealing in its entirety current and all past zoning ordinances, as versions from 1938, 1959, 1974, and 2009 are all referenced at various points within the ordinance. So now to get to some of the particulars, in terms of new zoning districts, we recommended 4 new zoning districts. The last one, the Slope Conservation District, is currently exists in the township code. It's just not in the zoning ordinance. So we're recommending that you bring the slope conservation into the zoning ordinance. So that's why it's listed as a new zoning district. But we have, you currently have an AO, apartment office district, but you also have an A apartment district and an O office district. So those are 3 separate districts, mostly along routes 3 and 252, all with a limited land area, and they all basically allow the same uses, apartments or offices, just at varying degrees of density. So we basically said that the A apartment and the O office district could be merged into the AO apartment office district. So and I'll get to the map in a minute, but any area that's currently zoned either A apartment district, meaning it would only allow apartments, or O office district, it would only allow offices. Those are going to be rezoned to AO. So they could allow either offices or apartments. We also are proposing a new town center district at the intersections of Route 3 and 252, which is, Ann discussed this to a degree. The new town center zoning district will replace the existing C1 zoning, and also a small portion of the AO zoning at routes 3 and 252. And as Ann mentioned, the new town center zoning district is designed to encourage redevelopment more along the lines of a traditional Main Street style of development. where you have new commercial development built closer to the sidewalk, not set far as back. There's more of a pedestrian orientation. There's more of a small town center feel. Parking would be required to be placed on the side or the rear of establishments in the town center. So I'll go, when I pull up the map, I'll go into a little more detail about that. We're also proposing a new institutional district for the Garrett Williamson tract, which contains a lot of open space. The tract right now is zoned R2. So even though it's owned by the Garrett Williamson Foundation, and it may be under some type of easement, or they won't sell most likely anytime soon, it technically could be developed with residential uses because it is zoned R2. So we're proposing a new institutional district that would eliminate residential uses as permitted on that tract. And the allowable uses moving forward would be pretty much those types of uses that currently exist on the tract. So basically specialized schools, summer camps, recreational facilities, things like that, that will, the purpose of this is to help preserve the significant amount of open space by eliminating the possibility of residential development on the site. And then we also have a natural resource conservation overlay. And again, this applies more, basically better, more protective standards to streams and creeks, wetlands, woodlands, and steep slopes and flood hazard areas. So basically, we're increasing the buffer requirements around streams and lakes. So new development has to be set back further away from there. There are clear guidelines and regulations for wetlands, and an increased setback is required now for development near wetlands. As Ann mentioned, in terms of woodlands, your existing ordinance talks generally about minimizing disturbance. Now we actually, in this new resource conservation district, we specify specific disturbance limits for woodlands, with the idea being, again, to preserve more of the remaining forested areas in the township. So if you just hold on a minute, I'm gonna switch to the zoning map. All right, so what I have side by side is on the left-hand side is the proposed zoning map for the township. So if the township adopts this proposed new ordinance, there would be some significant rezonings of property from your current zoning map here on the right. So what I'm going to do now is just getting back to the zoning districts for a minute. I mentioned.
Sam, I'm going to interrupt you just a
Yep.
second. What's coming up on the screen is only the new zoning map. So if you start referring, they won't see the difference.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Just wanted you to be aware that that is you were talking through it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the apartment office district is identified, the new apartment office district is identified in light green, principally along Westchester Pike and along Route 252. And then it's also being proposed for Campus Boulevard as well. But again, the main change is all of these parcels that are now showing as AO are either currently zoned AO or they're zoned A apartment or O office. So there's really a limited change that's going to be occurring, but there are just a few small parcels in here that are, instead of being zoned apartment office, they're either zoned just office or just apartment. So we're rolling all of them into one district called the apartment office district. And the town center district, which is shown in purple here, would be a new district replacing the C1 commercial district, which is more of a traditional general auto-oriented commercial district. Because the comprehensive plan calls for the development of a walkable town center in this vicinity, we wrote and developed a town center district that will require new development to be more in the style of a traditional downtown or a main street. So that's where the town center district will be. I also mentioned the institutional district all the way out here in the western part of the township in purple. This is the Garrett Williamson tract. It contains a significant amount of open space. It's currently zoned R2, which could theoretically allow residential development. So we're rezoning it to institutional, which will limit the types of development that can occur on the site moving forward. So those are the principal new districts. Is the map still up, or am I back to the slides?
Map.
Okay, so
There you go.
now what I want to do is review some of the proposed rezonings. These are the more significant rezonings that would occur as part of the update to the ordinance. I'll run through these quickly, and then I'll toggle back to the map, and I will point out where each one of them is. So there's some minor rezonings of R1 and R2, generally east of Route 252, on the north side of Goshen Road, the south side of Bryn Mawr Avenue, and then also on Earls Road. The Green Country Village is being rezoned to AO apartment office. But generally the R1 and the R2 zoning, we're rezoning some parcels because they fit in more consistently with the new zoning designation. So there were some larger parcels in the R2 that actually would be better suited for the lot sizes required in the R1, and vice versa with the R2. We're also rezoning the C1 at routes 3 and 252 into a town center district with a little expansion north and south of Rhodes Avenue and west along the south side of Westchester Pike. And again, I'll get to the map in a minute to identify those. We're proposing to rezone Dunwoody Village from CCRC to SU1 special use. And we would amend these special use district to allow a CCRC. So this won't make Dunwoody Village non-conforming. But the task force thinks moving forward, it's better to have a little more of a diverse zoning district that allows a little wider range of uses than just the CCRC, which only permits continuing care communities. Campus Boulevard is being rezoned from SU1 Special Use 1 to AO Apartment Office. The Garrett Williamson tract is being rezoned from R2 to institutional. And then Alice Grimm Boulevard on the north side of Westchester Pike, just to the east of the Veterans Memorial. The perimeter tracts on the north side, on the perimeter of Alice Grimm Boulevard, are going to be rezoned to a new residential category. And then also the site of the Valley View Golf facilities will be rezoned from SU2 to SU1. The SU2 district will be eliminated. So switching back to the map now. So the R1 and the R2 I was talking about, north of Goshen Road, some of the larger parcels right in here that are currently zoned they're currently zoned R1. They'd be better suited to north of Goshen Road, just be R1A. So we're rezoning those to R1A. And then there were a few parcels in here in the R1A area that were smaller. They were zoned R1, but they were non-conforming because they were smaller than the required minimum. So we rezoned a handful of parcels here to R1A, just for a little more consistency. And then also south of Bryn Mawr Avenue, these parcels here, which are currently zoned R1A, are more appropriately suited to becoming R1.
No,
So-
Sam, they were zoned R3 and we changed them to R2.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
So there's some R2. So just to recap based on that, there are some R2 parcels up here that were zoned R1A, and we're bringing those into compliance with what's currently developed there and making them R2. And then there were these parcels down here, which were zoned R3, were actually more appropriate from a lot size perspective to be in the R2 district rather than the R3. And then the Green Country Village development is being rezoned to apartment office district.
I think it's being rezoned R4.
Yes, you are correct. I was mistaken on that. So the yes, the Green Country Village is being rezoned from AO to R4. It's principally a residential development, and the potential for offices to, or the interest in having offices being developed out here at some future point is limited. So we think R4 is a more appropriate zoning designation. Routes 3 and 252, again, the dark purple is all currently C1. It's going to become the new town center district. We did extend it a little bit where I have the cursor. A few of these parcels are currently zoned R2. And also the parcels on the north side of Rhodes Avenue are also zoned R2. A number of these these homes are currently being used as businesses, though. So we think it would make more sense to incorporate them into the town center district. Additionally, we extended the town center district. The frontage along Westchester Pike right here is currently zone C1, and we took everything in between Westchester Pike and School Lane up to the Goddard School, and instead of C1, it will also become town center. And then Dunwoody Village, which is currently CCRC, will be rezoned to SU1, but it will allow for the continuation of a continuing care retirement community. Campus Boulevard, which is currently zoned to SU1, is going to be, is proposed to be rezoned to AO apartment office. So the office uses permitted in the SU1 would still be allowed in the AO office district. But this would increase the possibility of, or it would allow residential development on the Campus Boulevard site, either as a redevelopment or a renovation of some or all of the existing office buildings. The task force felt that there was potential for conversion to residential at some point, and the SU1, which is what it's currently zoned, only permits housing for the elderly. So again, we're rezoning this to AO. We're limiting the height in the AO district to 3 stories or 35 feet, unless a development in the AO has frontage on Westchester Pike or 252. And then we would allow an increase up to 4 stories and 45 feet. The Garrett Williamson tract, again, as I mentioned, currently zoned R2, will become IN institutional. And then Alice Grimm Boulevard, this area, the 2 red areas that it's currently zoned C2 and it's undeveloped. But then behind it, the current zoning is a mixture of R4 and R5, which is a residential zoning designation. Each of those districts one of the districts allows development in the range of approximately 5 units per acre. The other one allows approximately 10 units per acre. We're gonna streamline, eliminate the R4 here, make it all R5, and we're also going to allow cluster development on the site. That's one of the changes proposed to currently your cluster development option is only enabled in the R1, R1A, R2, and R3. So we're allowing cluster development in the R4 and the R5. But so this site is proposed to remain residential, but it'll be at a reduced density of approximately 2.25 units per acre. And then the final rezoning site would be the Valley View Golf Course site and the Rafferty Subaru, which is currently zoned SU2. And we found that there was generally a pretty good overlapping redundancy between the SU2 and the SU1. And we thought they could be effectively combined. So this site will be rezoned to SU1. And I can go into a little more detail about the differences between the SU1 and we're modifying the SU1 to allow some of the higher impact commercial uses allowed in the SU2, but it's still, it won't allow, for instance, car dealerships. So just to wrap up, in addition to streamlining the code, consolidating and combining redundant districts, proposing some new zoning districts, proposing a number of rezonings as part of this comprehensive update. We also went through the entire ordinance and updated a variety of general provisions. So as I mentioned, we made some changes to the cluster community development. We're allowing cluster development in the R4 and the R5. As Ann mentioned, we're reducing the acreage minimum. So currently you need 25 acres to do a cluster development. We're bringing that down to 5. We also addressed some ongoing issues related to fences and accessory structures, where the regulations tend to drive or force people to apply for variances. For instance, currently the zoning doesn't allow fences in front yards. So anyone that wants to put a fence in their front yard has to go to the zoning hearing board for a variance. And we just made the simple tweak of, in the general regulations chapter, inserting fences are permitted in the front yard at a maximum of 4 feet. And hopefully that'll eliminate some of the number of requests for variances that you get with fences and other related accessory structures. We also added provisions for accessory apartments. They're currently allowed only on estates in the township, which are large residential developments, and the task force felt that they should be allowed in all residential districts, not just residential districts that qualify as an estate due to their size in acres. And then we're also considering the possibility of allowing accessory dwelling units, which would be separate from the principal home, and that would be allowed by conditional use. We also added provisions for the allowance and regulation of group homes, which the zoning ordinance does not currently address. We added provisions for no impact home-based businesses, which the ordinance does not address, and we also, and which is required by state planning law, that no impact home-based businesses are allowed. And we're also making some adjustments and expanding a little bit on what types of home occupations are allowed and how they're allowed. We also added provisions for daycare centers and child daycare homes. We made some adjustments to the parking and signs chapter. If anyone has any particular questions on that, I can discuss those. And we developed specific standards and criteria for special exceptions and conditional uses, which were to some extent lacking. So that's an overview of the significant changes that are being proposed to the zoning. I know that might have been a lot to take in, but this is the table of contents of the proposed new zoning ordinance. So the ordinance has been reduced from about 30 plus articles to 17 articles.
Sam?
Yeah.
If you have something that you're showing, it's not showing on the screen.
Oh, sorry. Let me see. Hold on a minute. I seem to be having trouble having the share screen option.
I just recommend you go ahead and
Yeah.
whatever you got.
So that is basically an overview of the zoning. If you can hold on one second. So our remaining tasks at this point are to have the task force review and approve the draft zoning ordinance. And then we would forward this new draft to the Township Planning Commission for their review and comment and feedback. Each member of the Planning Commission would get a full, complete copy of the proposed draft ordinance. And once the Planning Commission has had time to digest that, a public meeting would be scheduled for the Planning Commission to comment on the plan and also on the ordinance, excuse me, and also for residents and other members of the public and stakeholders to comment as well. The ordinance will then be submitted to the County Planning Department for advisory review, and then it would be sent to the Township Board of Supervisors. The draft, as revised by the Planning Commission and by input from the public, would then, each member of the board would get a copy of the final draft, and the board would then conduct a public hearing to receive feedback and comment on that draft, and then the next step would be adoption of the new ordinance.
Sam or Steve, can one of you map that out and just a calendar, just estimate?
Yeah, we'll do that. Just so everybody knows, our goal is to have it to you for your October meeting, for you to be reviewing it. I believe it's going to be at the November County Planning Commission. And then you potentially would have one more review of it at your November. We'd like to have it before the board at the December meeting of the board. And so that is kind of the plan.
My apologies on the loss of my screen sharing capability. I'm not sure why the screen share bar is not popping up. Does anyone have any questions?
And I'll go ahead and get out a kind of a calendar for everybody to see.
Okay. I did email you the map, Steve.
Yes.
If you're able to share that, if need be, if anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have questions? Comments?
Nice job. No, it's a lot of work dealing with pulling all the loose ends together.
Yes, thanks, Kurt. You know, as the planning commission member that was on the the rezoning commission, I think we did a good job, and we're excited to get it up to the board for them to digest it and move forward with it.
There were indeed a lot of loose ends,
Yeah.
and we think we've wrapped a lot of those up.
We pushed you hard, Sam.
There's still a bit more to go.
I know.
All right, I think if there's not any questions or comments at this point, I don't know if the public has any comment they wish to make. I did check the screen or the email. There was none there other than Guy was mentioning that he couldn't get in, so I did get that. I do have, Mr. Chairman, I do have someone who from the public. Patty Wilson. You appear to still be muted.
To unmute myself.
There you go.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not getting,
Go
We
ahead,
can
I
hear
can't
you.
hear you.
We can
No,
hear you.
We can
Patty.
hear you.
Go ahead, Patty.
I don't know how to get a hold of them.
Speak. Can somebody text her
I'm
Yeah, I
and
don't-
tell her we
I
can hear
can't
her?
hear.
We can hear you.
Zoom. Great. Apparently everybody can hear me, but I can't, I'm not hearing anything. So I'm going to go ahead and give a public comment. First and foremost, I'm very appreciative of Ann and Sam's work on this project. I'm going to start by saying I agree with Ann's approach on walking and how and what open space you want to preserve. Very concerned about the numbers on the riparian buffer. We found in the past we had a 50-foot buffer and you guys were offering waivers to 25 feet. She showed some numbers that would suggest 100 feet riparian buffers. The notion of interlocking the conservation districts is awesome. You can look at an area like the Whitehorse area where we could end up with some wonderful walking trails. She is offering some information about directives on stormwater. I'm not clear yet whether you guys have dealt with the issue of all the small lots where we've ended up with folks coming in on undersized lots, trying to put very large lots, very large houses on them. I'm particularly talking about the areas in the heights and the avenues. I think that should be taken care of in the zoning. I appreciate that you're trying to figure out what to do at Route 3 and 252, but I think we need to be a little more honest of what we can do there. That is not a 2-lane highway. I'm going to offer to you that I'm a little confused on some of the changes to the zoning districts, particularly in the Campus Boulevard area, where you're talking about allowing apartments now. So I think looking at those areas and really understanding what you'd like to see developed there is very, very important. I'm very concerned that that town center area sounds to me an awful lot like the old commercial residential. And then finally, what I am going to offer to you is it's a little disconcerting to me to hear Mr. Haber working on our zoning ordinance, but he felt comfortable weighing in on the Corey property as a recommendation at the Planning Commission at Delaware County. I'm going to ask that Newtown Township ask Mr. Haber to recuse himself from any planning recommendations that come before him related to zoning in Newtown Township prior to this being adopted. And finally, because there are such significant changes here, I'm going to ask that we somehow try to put some of these very significant changes to our zoning into plain English and make them either part of the In magazine or a communication to residents on Facebook. Mr. Altieri has been awesome about putting things on Facebook. This is huge and significant, the changes you are suggesting, particularly to Garrett Williamson, to Westchester Pike, and to some of the residential zoning areas. I think we owe it to the residents of this township to over communicate these issues. Thank you.
Just quickly addressing the comment about recusing myself. Patty is correct. About a year and a half ago, in another capacity, I would, in the planning office, I was reviewing zoning ordinance amendments. And that one did come to me as a review. So I did prepare a staff report on that one. But I am no longer doing any zoning ordinance amendment reviews or any Act 247 reviews. So I've effectively recused myself.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to turn it back to Ms. Curtis, and just let Kurt, you can go ahead and move forward. This part of this review is complete. I will say that there is, multiple requirements regarding publication as we move forward with the zoning changes. There's, not only at the planning commission meeting, but also at the board meeting, there'll be additional chances for people to view it. It will be put up on the website ahead of time. It will be, we will get the word out and make it there as part of that move. So that, and we want to do that. But we wanted to bring it before you just so you kind of knew where we were and how we got to where we are, so that when it's before you, we can really just talk about the nuts and bolts of the zoning ordinance.
That makes sense. Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Sam. Thanks, Ann.
Sure.
So we're gonna
Be seeing you soon.
Thank you.
All right.
move on to item 2, which is plan review for Rafferty Subaru, adding a shed along the edge of their property. Do we have someone from the applicant? I'm not recognizing names here on the.
I mean, everybody who I see in the public, I know, and they don't represent the applicant, and I do not see anyone in this area for that.
They were certainly mailed notice, and it was made clear to Bob that he wouldn't be on this agenda if he didn't give us money, which he did, so.
Is Giovanna available to go over her review letter?
I am here.
There she is.
Hello, Newtown family.
Hey, Giovanna.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, G.
Well, I am
That's
here.
what G looks like. I was forgetting.
Hey, I've seen you a couple of times already.
That's true.
We can certainly go over it. I'm not sure why Bob or somebody from Nave Knoll isn't present, but we did issue a review, so they knew we took a look at it. I know we have not heard anything back from them since we issued the review, so
Did they by chance send an email recently where they say they can't get into the Zoom call by chance?
I have not gotten anything.
Okay.
Let me look again real quick.
Give us a quick review, and since we're all here, and then we'll have to regroup next time they come.
Okay.
Sounds good.
If they come. So this is an amendment to the land development plans for Rafferty. They actually have already built a 960 square foot shed on the rear of the property. It is fairly close to the property line in the back. And so we issued a letter September 18th, few comments on it, some of them pretty significant. The first comment we had was that the shed is actually where it's at now, located in the 100-year floodplain of Crum Creek.
That's those little dots on the plan.
Yes, correct. And because of that, there is also, because it's in the floodplain, accessory structures are only allowed to be a maximum of 1,000 square feet when they're in the floodplain. And they're also required to be anchored down so that they don't float away.
You mean a maximum of 100 feet?
100 feet was the maximum. They're at 960.
Right, okay. Just check.
Our second comment, was with regards to knowing what is in the shed, what they're gonna contain in the shed. The ordinance prohibits certain materials because if it does flood, whatever those materials are, if they're hazardous or chemicals or anything like that, could get into the stream and degrade the water quality of the stream. So we need clarification on what exactly will be stored in the shed. It's also located over, oh, there we go, that's helpful. It's also located over top of inventory parking. So that doesn't necessarily impact the site parking for customers. It just reduces the amount of inventory cars they can keep on site, but they have not updated the tabulation on the plan indicating how many spaces they now will have. And then our last comment was just a signature block for the recordation of the plans. I know Andy has had some conversations with Mr. Rafferty as well on this. They have an existing accessory building on the property, or they had it. I don't know if they've already taken it down, but I think they were using it for detailing. It was pretty close, in close proximity to the building, but it was significantly smaller. That is proposed to be removed so that they will only have one accessory structure. But this one, like I said, is already installed.
Was it affixed to the ground? I'm just kind of getting at, is it personal property or is it really, is it just sitting on blocks or is it on a poured foundation or?
Andy, do you know
Well-
better? You probably know better than I do.
Yeah, what I can tell you is, no, it's not on a fixed foundation. I believe it's on some type of pier, but that pier doesn't appear to be sitting on a footing. And I do not have information in regard to how it's anchored at the moment.
Yeah, they haven't provided anything like that to us. I know the last, the existing building, shed building that they had was not that significant of a structure either. I don't believe that was really anchored down in any way
Right.
at all. So this is kind of a similar setup. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. Does anybody have any questions for me?
A question on just our definition of accessory structure. Does it need to be affixed to the ground or can it sit on the ground?
This
Just
one
kind
needs to be affixed because it's in the floodplain.
Yeah, but if it were out of it, would it need to be affixed?
No,
Okay, and that's what our it doesn't need to, it can be movable, but it still qualifies as an accessory structure. That's kind of what I'm just trying to understand.
and he may, well, I don't, it may be possible that he moves this to get it out of the floodplain.
Right.
I just don't know. I don't know that they realized that that was going to be an issue. I guess he just dropped it back there as far back and out of the way as possible, to still kind of keep his maximum inventory spaces and not really have a lot of impact to his facility.
If I may, I do want to mention the fact that there are issues, extenuating circumstances with regard to obstructing these inventory storage areas. We're dealing with another matter. It's a zoning related matter, but it appears that some storage of Mr. Rafferty's vehicles is happening off this site. So this structure taking up some of those spaces does have a greater impact.
Andy, when you say off the site, do you mean like just over the property line or like on a property?
No, on adjacent properties on properties throughout the township.
Just say they're not adjacent.
Not necessarily adjacent, no.
And we think we lost, do we think it's about 4 there that's taking?
Yeah, it looks like about 4 spaces, 5 spaces. I think each one of those lines, I think, was 2 to 3 cars.
Deep, right.
But then there's some line work underneath of that. So, it could be upwards of 6, 8 cars at least. It's hard to see on your plan too, but the whole thing is located within.
Yeah, they didn't miss.
Yeah, you can see, it's, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of parking that it's impacting. If you can park 2 cars in each of those rows, there's your 12 cars right there that he's losing. But he also is removing the shed that's up further, so he may gain a couple of cars up top, but overall it's a loss in inventory spaces.
I don't have any other questions. I'll open to anyone else, till they come in and we can have some dialogue about it.
I'm good.
Andy, do you have any other pressing concerns or things you want to bring up? I know.
No, I mean, I guess we just, the only concern that I have is the fact that it's there, and it was put there without any approval. So, I guess we'd like to relate to Mr. Rafferty the urgency of coming to the next planning commission to make sure he addresses your questions and concerns so we can move this along as quickly as possible in one way or another.
Agreed.
I will
Yeah.
try and reach out to him tomorrow. Maybe have a conversation and see what his plans are. If he, if he is able to move it, that at least helps with the floodplain and the anchoring. Now, I guess, Andy, he doesn't have electric or anything hooked up to it that you're aware of, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I know with the other building he did.
Right. Yeah, not that I'm,
It's awful big to not have a light in the back of it.
you would think, right.
Okay. Well, I'll reach out to him and have, make sure he's present for the next meeting and see if we get I would assume by then we would get a response from his engineer on some of these items too.
Giovanna, where is the floodplain line near this 960 square feet?
That dotted line that I guess it's Kathy is highlighting there, that is the
Okay.
line. So the building is entirely within the floodplain.
Okay. And I see that the existing shed there is 581 feet. That's
Yeah.
the one that's going to be removed.
Correct.
So he's just substituting one for, or the concept is substituting one for the other.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would be a 360 square foot, roughly maybe 380 square foot increase.
An increase, yes.
So would there not be substantial issue if you just took this 960 square foot shed and relocated it to where the existing shed is?
No, that would eliminate a lot of his problems.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Is there any public comment out there, Steve? I don't know if we have public with us anymore.
1 second, I'm looking. We still do, I do see a hand raised. Give me 1 second.
This is Patty Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane. I just have 2 comments on this. One thing is the comment that says, is he able to move it? He placed this building in the floodplain without permission. As a resident, hearing, is he able to move it, should be, why was it built in the first place? We don't want things in the floodplain. We have had huge issues with flooding in our neighborhoods. So why we're even having this discussion is mind-boggling to me. Secondarily, we have to get out of the habit of having people come in and ask for forgiveness after they've done things against zoning. And I guess lastly, hopefully we've issued a zoning violation for this particular issue that causes Mr. Rafferty to feel like he has to get to you folks to deal with this in a way that's respectful of your time, as well as understanding that with a building in a floodplain, he is going to cause problems for other people. Thank you. You think they could hear that?
Yeah, we did.
Great, thanks.
It's
I do not see any other hands raised, and I'm checking emails. And there are no emails.
Okay, any other comments from planning members? Doesn't look like it. Do we have a motion? Do we have any new business? Or a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Looks like the ayes win.
Good to be back with you guys, by the way.
Yes. So, well, thanks all, and everyone have a good night.
All right.
You just
All
say-
right,
Thank you
take
very
care.
much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.